The next part of this build that I'm focusing on is getting these hubs prepared with the bearings in them. They've already been coated nicely with paint and cleaned out. I've got the lug studs that need to be pressed in. I've got most of the lockout hubs prepared and cleaned. Might need to do a little more on those, but that's alright. I've got the actual set of dial indicators in the house. I got a second set of these painted up and cleaned and ready for assembly. So I'll go ahead and press the lugs into the hub. I'm going to do that with this piece of wood. Put this in the press. Then when you set the hub in the press, you've got a recess spot where the stud can push down through and not interfere. Like that. And you can just push on it directly with the press right here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in the back corner where I have very little room. I had to change my strategy. My little hole in the piece of wood just started crushing in. So now I have a socket that the bolt can pass through. Worked like a treat. I'm just going to do that for all 12. These are the spindles I'm going to be using. They are not any different than stock per se. I think they're just made by somebody aftermarket, not actually built by Toyota. Same dimensions, everything about them is the same, so go ahead and use them. The thing they are missing is the brass bushing that goes in the back. Your axle shaft, the Burfield joint slides through here, and it kind of keeps it from rubbing. I'm actually not sure if you're supposed to grease these, but as with most press fit things, I'm going to go ahead and apply a little bit of grease, put this in the press, and press it in there. I think the grease is a good safety measure. Got a wheel bearing kit, typical stuff. Got the rear seal, goes on the back side of the hub. The outer and inner bearings and races, as well as the seals for the hub. One of these goes to the mating surface of the actual lockout body, so that would go there. The round gasket goes to that one, and then the 6-star one goes on the outside of the lockout. But for now, I will be pressing the races into the hub. This is the inner bearing race. Got my inner and outer bearings greased. Races are in this one. Next would be taking one of those bearings and dropping into the back side of the hub. So we're going to take one of these rear bearings, drop it into the hub, and after it's in there, we should be able to take our rear wheel bearing seal, wheel seal, and take a light coating of grease off of our bearings and grease the outer edge of the bearing. Alright, that seal will sit a little bit proud of the surface, but it's on there. Put a little grease inside the lip. Now, that seal will seal against this lip on the spindle. It rides in here where a fingernail is. And this thing looks kind of rough on the surface, but it's not. I assure you, it's very smooth. So, just like surface imperfections. Alright, in order to make this install these hubs easier, I'm going to temporarily use the end of the axle housing as a holder. So I'll show you the order everything goes in. This is not the final install. On the final install there will be a seal that goes here in between that knuckle housing and the spindle, but for now I won't be using it. So order these would go is you got two flats on the sides and one on the bottom. The bottom one's got a little cutout in it. That's for water drainage. That'll go on first. Then you have a gasket that goes on after that. It's got a little dip in the bottom. You can see down here. That's to let that water out. That dip goes to the bottom. So this will fit right over. Then on a standard solid axle you'd have what is called a backing plate. It goes behind the disc brakes. In this one I have a backing plate eliminator. I have made these just by taking a backing plate and cutting all the extra material off and sanding it down, but it's a very particular thickness. But anyhow, it has an up, so that's going to go up on here next. Get everything lined up. And then lastly, this is the seal. Hopefully some of these come up okay. This is the seal for the hub. And it goes with the up. And there's no gasket that goes between the backing plate and this. I'm temporarily going to put 4 bolts in, not all 8. They're M10 by 1.25 by 30 millimeter. Stock at these studs, but I found that if you use a bolt like this, it's far easier to have a disassembly on the trail, and you can just unbolt these and slip this entire hub assembly off without breaking the seal down for these inner hub bearings. You could take it out, slide your axle shaft out, and then put this back on as a unit. Alright, like I said, that's just temporary for now. Next we'll take our hub with our greased bearing in it. We slide it over. It'll be a little firm. Alright, it's all the way seated. It's a little stiff right now. The seal's pretty tight, but that's alright. I've got lubricant on it. It does move, but it's pretty stiff. Alright, next we'll take our outer bearing. Our outer bearing will go on. Just like that. It should seat way down in there. And you've got one of these washers. Some of this is going to be hard to see. Got one of these washers. It's got a little tang at the top. That tang will ride on a groove in the top of this spindle. You slip it in there like that. Then I've got one of the retainer nuts for the spindle. I'll thread that on. One of the hex lock nuts on here. I checked online, it says you need to tighten it to 43 foot-pounds. That's the number I'm finding. Once you have it at that torque, I've got the rotor on here to make it a little easier to turn. Turns well. Double check the 43 foot-pounds. Then loosen it so that the nut comes loose. And we're going to retighten it just barely snug. Online I found 4 foot-pounds as a number. I'm just going to go ahead and call it just snug. Rotates fine. We're then going to take this lock ring. It's got a tang at the top here. It will fall into the same groove. Then you put your outer lock nut on. And this one we're going to torque to 47 foot-pounds. And now that that's tight, you're going to look at these tangs and find ones that line up on each side. So this one down here, I'm going to bend it inward. And then this other one right here, I'll bend outward towards me. And this is to ensure that neither of these nuts will move from this position. I think I'm also going to bend this one. And that's getting one hub rebuilt, greased, and ready to go. Once I complete the lockouts and the outer hub assembly, I will bolt those here. That's going to be it for wheel bearings.